In the golden age of ancient Israel, one man stood above all others, a king gifted with unparalleled wisdom, riches beyond measure, and a heart chosen by God. King Solomon, the son of David, was a ruler whose decisions shaped the destiny of a nation and whose wisdom attracted rulers and scholars from every corner of the known world. He authored Proverbs, penned Song of Solomon, and built the awe-inspiring temple in Jerusalem. His fame spread far and wide, making him one of the most celebrated figures in history. But as he approached his final days, the legacy he had so carefully constructed began to unravel. How did the wisest king in history, blessed with divine favor and unmatched insight, end up at such a tragic and hollow conclusion? How could a man who once led his people to spiritual greatness, turning them toward God, ultimately fall so far from the ideals he once embodied? In his final days, Solomon's wealth, wisdom, and accomplishments seemed as fragile as dust, slipping away, leaving him to ponder his regrets. His heart, once ablaze with devotion, was now divided, lost in a fog of regret and vanity. Solomon's reign began with humble hope. When God appeared to him in a dream, offering to grant him anything he desired, Solomon's request surprised the heavens. He didn't ask for wealth, power, or fame. Instead, he humbly asked for wisdom to govern his people justly, to discern right from wrong. God was pleased with Solomon's heart, so much so that he granted him not only unparalleled wisdom, but also wealth and honor beyond any king before him. Solomon was destined to be the shepherd of a nation blessed by God's presence. And in those early days, Solomon's wisdom was legendary. Rulers and philosophers from distant lands traveled to Jerusalem to witness this young king's gift for themselves. His judgments, such as his famous decision regarding the two mothers, both claiming to be the mother of the same child, showcased his deep understanding of human nature. Word of his wisdom spread far and wide, and Israel's influence expanded as he cemented alliances and strengthened borders. Jerusalem blossomed under his rule, becoming a center of trade, knowledge, and culture. With each passing year, Solomon's wealth and fame grew. Gold and silver became as common as stones in Jerusalem, and the people of Israel experienced prosperity unlike anything they had known before. His palace was a marvel of architecture, and his throne, crafted from ivory and adorned with gold, symbolized his unmatched power. Solomon's wealth, wisdom, and influence turned Israel into a beacon, attracting traders, diplomats, and scholars from all corners of the known world. Yet, as his reign reached new heights, so did his pride. And with that pride came decisions that would lead to his ultimate downfall. To fortify his kingdom, Solomon began forming alliances with surrounding nations. These alliances often involved marriage to foreign princesses, a strategy that seemed wise at first. After all, these marriages strengthened Israel's position among powerful neighbors. But as Solomon took more and more wives from foreign lands, he slowly began to compromise the very values that had once guided his life. Each wife brought with her the gods of her homeland, gods that had no place in Israel. At first, Solomon may have convinced himself that he was still faithful to the God of Israel, that he could maintain these alliances without compromising his devotion. But Solomon's heart, once fully dedicated to God, gradually became divided. His foreign wives practiced their own rituals and worshipped their own gods, and Solomon, in an attempt to keep peace in his court, allowed it. High places for worship and idols began to appear in the land. Altars were built for the gods of Moab, Ammon, and Sidon. The king who had built the magnificent temple for God now permitted shrines to foreign deities, allowing idolatry to take root within Israel. Bit by bit, Solomon's compromises led him further from the devotion he had once known. As the years passed, Solomon's spirit grew restless. Despite his vast wealth, his grand palace, and his powerful alliances, he began to feel an emptiness that nothing could fill. The wisdom that had once guided him now seemed like a distant memory. In his private moments, Solomon likely reflected on the simplicity and devotion of his youth, when he had sought only to honor God. He must have remembered his father, David, who, despite his own flaws, had never strayed in his loyalty to the Lord. Solomon's choices haunted him, and the consequences of his actions began to weigh heavily on his heart. In the book of Ecclesiastes, we find the words of an aging king who has seen it all and is left pondering the meaning of life itself. "Meaningless, meaningless," he writes, "utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless." The king who had once possessed everything was now grappling with the reality that all his wealth, wisdom, and pleasure were fleeting, unable to satisfy the deeper longing of his soul. He had sought meaning in the grandeur of his accomplishments, only to discover that they were as insubstantial as vapor. Despite Solomon's wisdom, the influence of his foreign wives had led him into idolatry, and the man who had once been a model of devotion became a symbol of spiritual compromise. The law had warned Israel's kings against taking many wives, for fear their hearts would be turned away from God. But Solomon, blinded by his own ambitions, believed he was strong enough to resist. He thought his wisdom would protect him, that his strength was enough. But even the wisest man in history could not escape the consequences of turning his heart from God. As Solomon grew older, the unity of his kingdom began to fray, like the delicate threads of a once robust tapestry coming undone at the seams. The people who had once reveled in the golden age of his reign, basking in the glory of prosperity and wisdom, now felt the oppressive weight of his extravagant lifestyle and grandiose ambitions. Heavy taxes were levied upon them, a burden that grew increasingly intolerable as Solomon pursued ever more lavish building projects, including magnificent temples and palatial residences that seemed to stretch toward the heavens, funded by the very labor of his subjects. Forced labor became commonplace, as the king sought to fulfill his visions of grandeur, leaving his people feeling like mere cogs in a grand machine, their own needs and desires brushed aside in the pursuit of royal opulence. Resentment began to simmer beneath the surface, rising like a storm that threatened to engulf the once harmonious nation. The peace that had characterized Solomon's reign, a testament to his initial wisdom and understanding, was now under siege by growing dissatisfaction and unrest among the people, who felt increasingly disconnected from the ruler they had once revered. The foundation of his kingdom, once so strong and unyielding, was beginning to crack under the strain of his excesses, and the realization dawned that the very glory he had built might soon give way to division and discord, unraveling the legacy he had worked so hard to establish. Despite these warnings, Solomon did not turn back. He continued steadily down a path of moral compromise, one that led him further from the values he once held sacred. The wisdom that had defined his early reign, the wisdom that had drawn kings and queens from distant lands, began to wane as he constructed altars for foreign gods, gods he had once denounced as false and unworthy. With each altar raised, each shrine erected, Solomon allowed a piece of his heart to drift away from the God who had blessed him so abundantly. The spiritual decline of Israel was not a sudden event. It started within the very heart of its king. The God who had chosen him, endowed him with wisdom, wealth, and honor beyond measure, was no longer the center of Solomon's life. The relationship that had once been so vibrant, a cornerstone of his strength and success, now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the idols and distractions he had welcomed into his kingdom and his life. Solomon, who had once led Israel in devotion and worship, now found himself ensnared by the allure of foreign beliefs and customs, his heart divided and his faith compromised. The once unbreakable bond between him and his Creator had faded, veiled behind a cloud of earthly pursuits and divided loyalties, leaving him spiritually adrift in the final years of his reign. In these final years, Solomon felt the weight of his choices more than ever. His once stable kingdom was fragile, his people burdened by his own excesses, and his spirit troubled. He had gained the whole world but lost the very soul of his purpose. The regret that filled his heart is reflected in the words of Ecclesiastes as he warns future generations of the futility of earthly pursuits. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired, I refused my heart no pleasure. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. In his final days, Solomon understood that his disobedience had come at a great cost, a heavy realization that weighed on his heart and mind. The vibrant connection he once shared with God had been overshadowed by the seductive allure of wealth, power, and the desire for acceptance from those around him. Blessed with unmatched wisdom and prosperity, he had drawn admirers from distant lands, yet in the midst of his grandeur, he forsook the very principles that had laid the foundation for his success. The God who had guided him with divine wisdom had also entrusted him with clear commandments, but Solomon chose to ignore them, believing he could navigate life without their guidance. Instead, he became ensnared by the idols he had allowed into his life, foreign gods, lavish lifestyles, and the pursuit of pleasure, which fragmented his heart and eroded his faith. As he grappled with the reality that his accumulated glory felt tainted by internal conflict, he realized that true fulfillment could not be found in material wealth or external validation, but rather in a heart aligned with divine purpose. This poignant realization marked a turning point for Solomon as he sought to reclaim the devotion he had once cherished, understanding that genuine wisdom lies in a steadfast commitment to one's faith and values rather than the hollow pursuits of worldly treasures. As he neared the end of his life, Solomon witnessed the unsettling beginnings of fracture within his once mighty kingdom. The signs of God's judgment were clear, a looming shadow that he could no longer ignore. Twice, the Lord had graciously appeared to him, issuing stern warnings to remain faithful and urging him to turn back from the path of disobedience he had chosen. However, Solomon's heart had grown hardened by the very choices that had led him astray, blinding him to the dire implications of his actions. Though the Lord, in his mercy, declared that for the sake of David, he would not tear the kingdom from Solomon's hands, the consequences of his unfaithfulness would inevitably fall upon his descendants. This painful truth hung in the air, a prophetic foreboding that the unity of Israel would not endure beyond Solomon's reign. The peace he had painstakingly built was already beginning to crumble, threatened by the seeds of division sown through his missteps. In these final moments of clarity, Solomon grappled with the weight of his legacy, realizing that the very foundations of his kingdom were compromised and that the harmony he cherished was slipping away, leaving a fragmented future for those who would come after him. Solomon's final words resonate with the profound wisdom he had acquired, yet they come too late to salvage the legacy he had built. "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind," he proclaimed, a poignant summation of the truth he had once known so well. This was the same man who had started with such promise, endowed with unparalleled gifts of wisdom and discernment, yet he ended his life as one burdened by deep regret and the weight of his choices. Solomon had ascended to the heights of divine wisdom, enjoying the favor of God and the admiration of nations, only to descend into the depths of human folly through his compromises and disobedience. His journey from faithfulness to compromise serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers that come with straying from God's path. It is a cautionary tale about how easily one can become ensnared by the allure of worldly pleasures, losing sight of the values that once guided them. As he reflected on his life, Solomon's words serve not only as a personal confession, but also as a timeless warning to future generations to uphold their faith and remain steadfast in their devotion. For in doing so, they secure not just their own peace, but the well-being of those who follow. As we reflect on Solomon's story, we're reminded of the importance of a life rooted in faithfulness, of the emptiness of pursuing wealth, power, or pleasure at the expense of our devotion to God. Solomon's life teaches us that no amount of worldly success can fill the void left by a heart divided. So, what does Solomon's story mean for us today? It's a call to examine our own lives, to consider the choices we make and the values we hold dear. Are we pursuing the things of this world at the cost of our relationship with God? Are we building our lives on a foundation that will last, or are we chasing after the wind? Solomon's story is a reminder that true fulfillment comes not from wealth or power, but from a heart devoted to God. If this story has touched you, we encourage you to like this video, subscribe, and share it with others who may need to hear this timeless message. Join us as we continue to explore stories that inspire and challenge us to live lives of purpose and faithfulness. Leave a comment below and let us know how Solomon's journey resonates with you. Your insights mean so much to us. And remember, as Solomon learned, that life's greatest wisdom lies in seeking God above all else. Thank you for watching, and may Solomon's story guide us all to walk faithfully in the path God has set before us.